Hi there, my name is Raphael Lander, and I am the founder and CTO of RealLinks. Today, I would like to talk about a relatively overlooked permission in SharePoint, the Browse User Information permission. This permission is responsible for a potentially serious privacy loophole in SharePoint extranets, and that's why it's important to understand how it really works. In this video, I will also show you what happens when you disable that permission for external users. It might sound like the right approach, but you will see that in some situations, it affects usability to a point where it's not even practical to use it. In some other situations, it might not even work. So, without further ado, let's jump into our SharePoint demo environment and see how it works.
Here I am in the site settings page of my partner extranet site. This is, by the way, an unscripted video, so bear with me if I hesitate a little bit or if I do any mistake. I'll try to go through the motion as quickly as I can. So first of all, let's take a look at the site permission page, and I'll go straight to the permission levels page. Here you see all the permission levels that you get by default with SharePoint. Let's take a look at the read permission level, for instance, which is the lowest permission level you have in SharePoint and which is typically associated with the visitors group on every SharePoint site. One of the permissions that this permission level has is the browse user information permission, and as you see here, it says view information about users of the website. So let's see how that would affect an external user if that user were to connect to your partner extranet and see what he would be able to do. What we've done on this particular site is we've configured the visitors group with all the Xtradium users. That's a group keyword that we have with Xtradium that allows all of the external users to have access to that partner extranet as visitors. So what I'll do now is I'll jump into Firefox to demo with a non-site collection administrator user. And so in this case, for instance, I'll sign up with a user called Mary. So when Mary signs in, she gets access to that partner extranet as a visitor, and she has access to two other site collections, Bluebird and Drone Project. We're not really going to take a look at those at this point, but this control is our site collections viewer web part that's available on Coplex if you want to use it. It's actually better to use site collections than subsites, but we'll see what happens when we use subsites as well. So first of all, Mary, obviously, she can click, here she sees the documents library. She can click on Alan Turing, who is an internal user with the demo domain, and she can see all of his information. As a matter of fact, if she goes into the URL and changes the ID that's available here, she'll be able to see other users. For instance, she'll be able to see Marilyn, and then she can also see other users such as Mark, who is another external user. And as a matter of fact, if she just changes all of those IDs and then picks any, and not all of them will work, by the way, but let's try with 57, for instance. Well, that one doesn't work in this case, but some of them will. So anyways, the idea is that she can get some information about all the users who access that site, and obviously that's a privacy issue. So the problem with this issue is that Mary has the browse user information permission when she logs into that partner extranet. So let's see what happens if we actually disable that permission for Mary. So what we'll do is, first of all, we're not going to change the read permission. We're just going to copy that permission level, and I will just call it read without browse user info, and we're simply going to uncheck browse user information. Next, and that's typically what you would want to do, is you want to create a new group for your external users in case you still want to use visitors for your internal users and you don't want to affect the way their ability to see user information. So let's just go ahead and create a new group, and I think we have to go in here and say create a new group, and here we'll just call it external visitors, and we'll assign the read without browse user info permission label to that group. Right, next what we'll do is we're just going to add our all Xtradium users group, and hopefully this is going to work. Here we go. And obviously what we're going to do as well is we're going to remove the all Xtradium users group from the standard visitors group. Okay, we're also actually going to remove those groups because Mary might belong to some of those as well. And next what we'll do is we'll just check the permissions of Mary on that site. So let's just do that here. If I pick Mary, here we go. We'll see that she has indeed read without browse user info. Okay. Now I'm just going to log in again as Mary. And now if I try to browse to some of the profiles pages, well, I get access denied. Problem is that if there are any documents, any user that shows up on that site, if I click on it, I also get access denied. So you see one of the first issues here with disabling browse user information is that you have a usability issue. You might have names that show up and people will potentially click on those, but they might get into an access denied page. So that's not really nice, especially if you have external users and you don't want to have too many support calls to your support center. Conversely, if you actually go into my settings, well, you also get an access denied page. So Mary cannot even see her own information on that site. So let's assume that this is still fine. You're fine with that. It's okay. You want to move ahead with that. So let's imagine that you do that. Now, obviously, you want to create. Let's say you want to create a subsite for Bluebird. So that's in the situation where you would actually use subsites. So in this case, what I'll do is I will go ahead, go to the site settings page. And here I'm just going to create a new subsite, and I'll just call it Bluebird, for instance. And that's let's make it a team site. Let's just use unique permissions because this one should only be used by the Bluebird users. So I'm just going to go ahead and create that Bluebird subsite with unique permissions. Next, what I would want to do is I would want to add all of the Bluebird users as members on the site. So let's just add them as Bluebird members because they should be able to collaborate on that site. That should resolve. And let's just press OK here. So here we go. I have a documents library as well on that subsite. Let's just go and upload a document. I'll just upload my project plan document on that site. And that's pretty much it. So now let's go back to Mary. Let's just refresh the page. Now she has access to that Bluebird subsite. And when she clicks on the page, well, what you see now is that she can indeed access the page. Okay, now she can actually go back in here and type, let's say 45, and she can see Mark. Now if she goes to ID equal 56, she can see Marilyn Jones. Now notice that user dis.aspx page is running within the context of that subsite, and that's the reason why Mary can actually access those pages. Obviously, if I try to do the same on top level site, that would not work. I get access denied because on that top level site, Mary does not have the browse user information right. So what that means is if you actually want to give some users permission on subsites, you also have to change those permissions in there. And so that create all sorts of hassles because you have to change all of those permissions. Now in this case, we added Mary to the the members group. Okay, so the members group by default is associated with the edit or contribute permissions, the edit permission actually, and that edit permission has also browse user information. As a matter of fact, all of the groups, the default permission levels have the group browse user information permission enabled by default. So if you want to make sure that your external users don't get access to those user profiles, then you need to make sure that you disable browse user information on every single permission level that they might inherit at some point, which might be a little bit difficult from a governance perspective, but that's a solution. What that also shows is that you should probably not go with subsites and probably switch to site collections, because on the site collections, obviously, it's probably less of an issue that they get access to the user information list, just because those sites are typically restricted. However, on this top level partner exonet, any user can log in and as such have his or her profile shared with other users. So that might be that's the reason why using subsites is typically not a great solution. But there's also a scenario where you might end up in a situation where users actually get the browser user information at some point, and you can revert back to a situation where they cannot see those profiles. Let me show that to you right now. Let's imagine that on the top level site, you have a specific tasks. Let's say you have a task list. That could be any list. Okay, and so on this task list, what we want is we want to restrict the permissions that our users have. Okay, so for instance, here in this situation, we have external visitors. They have read without the browse user information because it's inherited from the parent. But we want to go a step further. For instance, we want to disable view versions on that specific list. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let me go back to my site permission, go to permission levels, and I'll take this one that read without browse user info, and I'll copy that permission level again, and I'll just call it browse without without browse user information and view versions. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll remove the view versions permission from that permission level. So now I have my last read without, actually it's actually without, not with, but without browse user info and view versions. Now what I'll do is I'll go to my tasks list, use the shortcut to go to the settings page here, and I'll change the permissions for this list. I'll just say, okay, stop inheriting permissions. And now I will select my external visitors. I will edit user permissions, and I'll say, well, instead of read without browse user info, I want you to have read without browse user info and view versions. So what I expect here is that if I have a more restrictive permission on that list, that really should not affect what external users can do overall and whether they can access other user profiles. So let's see what happens now. Let's just sign out and then sign in again. And now let's try to go to the settings page. Well, as you can see here, Mary now magically has access to her own profile. Now if she goes to Mark Smith, she can go to Marilyn Jones. So just by changing something that has nothing to do with that user information, and actually not even adding the browse user information, simply by breaking inheritance and changing the permissions that external users might have on a specific list, you might end up in a situation where your users start having that browse user information again, and that's usually very weird, right? So let's just go to the site permissions and let's just check Mary permissions again. Now, well, we see that she still has the read without browse user information on that site, and that's all. We don't get anything else. But if we check the permissions and if we go to the tasks list, let's see if we can do that as well. Let's just type Mary. Right. So, in this situation, we don't really know what's going on. My assumption here is that at some point, Mary is assigned to that limited access permission as well. And unfortunately, that limited access permission level also has the browse user information permission checked. Unfortunately, you can't even change that limited access permission here. It's one of those permission level. I mean, it's the only permission level, maybe with full control. Yeah, there's two permission levels that you cannot edit: full control and limited access. So limited access has the browse user information permission as well. And as soon as a user gets assigned to that limited access permission, it gets obviously now access to all of the user profiles. So that's also a situation where your external users might end up being able to see all of the user information pages again. Now let's try something and let's see if we can actually go back to our previous situation. So if I go back to the tasks list now, and I say, oh, well, now I realize that my external users can access those user information pages. Is there a way that I can revert back to the situation where I was before? So let's try to do that. And what I'll do is I'll say, okay, let's just delete unique permissions. Doesn't really matter if they have access to the view versions, quite frankly. So now we've done that. So technically speaking, we should be in the same situation where we were before, where Mary did not have access to her user information at all. Now let's see what happens when I sign in again as Mary. So if I sign in again as Mary and I click on Alan Turing, for instance, well, she still has access to Alan Turing profiles and all of the other profiles that we already went through. Okay, Mark and Marilyn and her own profile as well. I don't know if it's a bug or not, quite frankly. Maybe that's a feature. But the problem is that if you break inheritance on, let's say, a list on a site, and then you want to revert back to the previous situation, well, you might end up in a situation where your users now have the browse user information permission, and that's not something that you can easily check in the permissions UI in SharePoint. So that's one of the reasons why disabling browse user information is not necessarily a really good solution. One, because it causes quite a bit of usability issues whenever users click on persons and they get to that access denied page. Or you might end up in a situation if you tweak the permissions a little bit too much, especially in lists or even in subsites, you might end up in a situation where users get that browse user information permission again without you really knowing about that. Now, is there a way that you can actually fix that? Well, there is actually. With Xtradium, we actually introduced that in our professional edition. So if you go to the form features and you enable profile redirection, and then you log in into your Exonet as a site collection administrator. Now you'll see here that you have a privacy settings available at the site collection level. And now what you can do is you can say, well, whenever external users try to view other external profiles, then they should be redirected to the Xtradium user profile page. And on those pages, we do not want to show any information. So no first name, no last name, no email. Really, they're not going to see anything in this particular situation. For internal users, when they view external profiles, well, they might actually see both first name, last name, and email. That sort of makes sense. Now, when external users view internal profiles, again, we do not want, we are going to actually redirect them to the user profile page, but we'll only maybe just show the first name and initial of the last name, and then not show the email address. Now let's just see what happens when we do that and log in as Mary again. Now when Mary goes to a Windows user profile, then that's what she'll see. She'll see Alan and T. Well, obviously, in this particular situation, that doesn't make a lot of sense because she could see the full name of the user, but at least she doesn't see the email address. And if she tries to go to other users, such as Marilyn Jones, she won't be able to pick up her email address or even her last name. If she goes to another external user, such as Mark, well, she won't see anything. And you can also do that for internal users if you want to, but typically you probably just want them to have the regular user experience, which they can have as well. But we also give you the option of setting that up for internal users when they have to view external profiles, and same when they actually want to see other internal profiles, which might not be something that you want to change anyways, but we also provide that for you. That concludes the demo here, and hopefully now you know that when you disable the browse user information permission, you might run into problematic situations, and that might not be the best choice for your SharePoint External. Thank you.